So again, hi everyone, my name is Dana Persley. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the director of CLIC. I'm really excited to be with you all and share some of the information that I hope will be relevant to you all as student leaders. If you could just share in the chat, if you haven't, which organization you're here for, that'll help me in our conversation today. So to give you a little background about myself, I think I'm on week 6 now at Denison, so it's been a wild ride and a transition, to say the least. To give you a little background, I'm coming to you most recently from Elon University in North Carolina, where I've been for the last 7 years. I've been working in higher education for about a decade now with student organizations, leadership development, all the areas that CLIC oversees. But I'm from Ohio. I'm a proud Clevelander, and so it's excited to be back in Ohio and working with you all. I've been primarily at small private liberal arts institutions, including Otterbein and Wittenberg. So this is a great opportunity for me to continue to work with schools in that residential setting. I wanted to share with you all which CLIC staff members are available in the office when. So in order to maintain social distancing and to keep folks working remotely in that hybrid, we have one CLIC staff member in the office every day. So I'm in on Tuesdays, Kim Bentley, our assistant, is in on Mondays, Katie is in on Wednesdays, and Susie is on Thursdays, and there are folks working with service and service learning, and Ashley, our associate director for fraternity and sorority life, is in on Friday. Always happy to set up virtual meetings to answer things via email if that is best for you, but just wanted to share, if you're looking for someone in CLIC to maybe answer your questions, here's when folks will be there and who's available. So my time with you this afternoon is going to be focused on two kind of different buckets of leadership. So when I talk about leadership development, there are two different ways that I like to conceive it. One is this idea of leadership development, or the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are important for you all to be able to create positive social change and make an impact, whether that's, working collaboratively with others, uniting around a common purpose, being able to have diversity of thoughts or opinions, and really having those leadership skills that are transferable that you'll be able to utilize both during your time at Denison, but then also beyond. And then there's this other bucket of what I would call leader skills, or these very positional things that you need to be able to know how to do, this knowledge to be successful in your role. So, how do you reserve a room? How do you get a university vehicle? How do you deal with budgets and utilizing your budget and spending money and making sure it's allocated correctly? How do you use Notebowl? I'm still trying to figure it out if you are as well. How do you purchase supplies for an event? How do you get a P card? What do you do with the receipts? How do you make it all happen? And then, how do you reserve vehicles if you need to travel? So all of this is what I would call leader skills. Like, these are important things for you to be able to be successful in your role. But everything you need as it relates to operation of your organization from that logistical leader perspective can be found in the Campus Organization Handbook. It has been updated this summer to reflect new policies and practices, and also to reflect some of the COVID-related impact for policies. In the handbook, you'll find things around like, what are the general requirements and expectations for organizations? How do you deal with finances? How do you go about doing fundraising, either for your organization or for a philanthropy? How do you effectively advertise and promote your org and events? How can you utilize technology? How do you go through all the logistics of an event, from registration to finding a space to dealing with catering and dealing with vendors? How do you host events responsibly with alcohol? How do you travel off campus? And then how do you have a good relationship or select an advisor? So those are a lot of the ins and outs that are in that org handbook. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that today, but I'm also happy to go through some details or answer questions as it might relate to some of these general leader skills that you need to be able to be effective. Also, I'll add, if you all have questions, I can see most of you in my video, but if you do have questions, feel free to unmute yourself. I'll also stop throughout different sections for you all to ask questions, but feel free to unmute and ask that as we're moving along today. So to talk about those leadership development skills that I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to make sure we're spending some time talking about your organization, vision, values, and goals. And so I like to give homework, and I also like to encourage people to reflect, because for me, reflection is where you make meaning of your experiences. And without that, really being able to reflect and understand what you're doing and what you're getting out of it. And so I ask you to think about what is most important to your organization. At the end of the day, whether it's COVID related or, you're thinking about being congruent with your organization. What is most important to you? And then where do you envision your organization going this year? Whether you're a new leader in your role or you're returning into this role, and when you look towards May or you look towards January at the end of the semester, what do you envision that your organization has accomplished or achieved? And how do you work backwards from that? So, if you have particular goals, which we'll talk about in a minute, how do you make sure you're doing everything leading up to that point to be successful? I also asked you to think about where do you envision your organization in the future? So as an alum in 3 years and 5 years and 10 years, when you come back to Denison, what do you want to know about Equestrian Club? Or what do you want to know about Opening Minds Throughout? Like, what are they doing? What is the impact they're making? And have you left the organization in a better place than when you found it? And then finally, what specific work can you do to achieve that vision and goals? What are the things that you want to achieve, to be successful in? What are the things that you actually need to do to be able to achieve? What are the mini goals and the steps to be able to achieve that vision and goals? And I bring that all to you because when you think about your role as an organization, you should be the heart, blood, and soul of what you're doing. So how do you align your mission, your vision, and your values? And your mission being kind of, at the end of the day, what is your purpose? What are you meant to do? What are you inspired to do? And then connecting that to your values. What are the traits or qualities that you're looking for in your organization leaders? How do you make sure you're living out those values in your actions and being congruent? As organization leaders, there's going to be times where you're challenged or you've had to make tough decisions, and how can you always center that mission and values in the way that you make decisions that are best for you and your organization? And then what is your vision, or what is that aspirational view, to go back to where are you going to see yourself at the end of the year or at the end of 3 years or 5 years from now? What are you aspiring to achieve? At the end of the day, what's your purpose? So with all of those things in mind, how can you work that together to be able to use that as core foundations for your work as a leader this semester? I know it's going to be a challenging year given COVID and and we're going to talk about some of those pieces here later. But as president or editors or team captain or whatever it might be in that leadership role, there's going to be times where you're going to be asked to hold your members accountable. You're going to have to ensure that you're acting congruently. And that's a tough role to be in as a peer, to hold other people accountable. And so how can you always center your decisions, your actions around these three pieces? By a show of hands, anyone want to share with me, have you done SMART goals before? Anyone? A couple people, SMART goals. Okay, cool, thumbs up, appreciate it. So SMART goals, for those of you who aren't familiar, haven't done it, refer to specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely goals. Another piece of homework that I encourage you to do, whether it's with your exec or with you or your advisor or your entire organization or chapter, to sit down and set out some short-term and long-term goals for yourself. Ask yourself questions like, what do you want to do? How will you know if you've reached it or achieved it? What is realistic and achievable within that sense? And how will you know if you made that goal? And then what timeline do you want to accomplish it? I think often we set goals and we kind of throw them in a folder, or we kind of forget about them. Like, we do it like it's a cool activity and we're like, yeah, let's set some goals, but then how do we hold ourselves accountable for them throughout the semester, throughout the year? So being able to fold that into your regular meetings or into your conversations with your advisor, and keep those goals centered and forward at the front of your leadership. So as I talked about at the beginning, there are a lot of leader things that you need to know and be able to do in your organization to be accessible. And this is just a snapshot of some of those resources and links that you can find the full list in the Campus Organization Handbook. So I wanted to pit stop here and see if there are any questions as it relates to some of these things, like event registration, budget allocation, finances, how do you post things on campus, how do you copy things, how do you deal with catering, how do you make sure a room is set up the way you want it, all of these kind of nitty-gritty details. So I'll pause here and see if there's any questions.
I have a question.
Yes, Heaven.
Is DCGA still doing finance funding for new projects?
Yeah, great question. So is DCGA doing finance funding? Yes, in some ways. So for all organizations, should have submitted a budget request this past spring for this current academic year. If you didn't, or if you're looking for special projects, there is additional funding. I have a slide about additional funding opportunities, so I'll pit stop there when we get to it and talk about some of those additional funding opportunities. But yes, there is. Good question. Other questions?
For event registration, or I guess at a room registration, do you know if certain spaces like Herrick Hall, for instance, are still going to be able to be reserved with the COVID protocols?
Good question. I have been working on this both before you all got back to campus and in the last week. So it's kind of, there's a couple layers to it. One, and I've got some COVID slides at the end that I can share a little bit more. Because of COVID, all of our room capacities have been decreased from anywhere from 50 to 80%. So when you're thinking about reservable spaces on campus for organization meetings or events, that's going to have to be something that we keep in mind. Right now, academic buildings are being locked at 5 p.m. at the end of classes so that those rooms can stay sanitized and clean for classes to start the next morning. However, I'm working with events and scheduling and the provost office to talk about which spaces might be available for students to access for org-related purposes after that 5 p.m. hour, knowing that you all will likely want to reserve spaces in buildings where you hold classes or just spaces that you're used to or familiar with. You can go in now onto the events and scheduling form and request rooms for regular meetings if you're looking to do that for folks. Right now, we're asking after this, kind of moratorium period at the beginning of the semester, we're asking for gatherings to be no more than 30 indoors or outdoors, but just knowing that you're going to need a space that can accommodate that size. And there are spaces on campus that I'll give you a few, for example, that I know have capacity over 30, but if you're like, I want a space for my exec and there's 5 of us, probably a typical classroom or some other spaces might be able to accommodate that. So Cameron, I don't know specifically on Herrick Hall. I have a list in my email with some spaces that we're working on, but I will communicate that more widely. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
I also have a question, Dana.
Yes.
So I know a lot of places like Swayze and the Bandersnatch that obviously were not classrooms before are now being used as classrooms. So if it's outside of the school day, can those still be reserved?
Good question. So right now, those spaces that were typically reserved outside of the typical, that were reserved for social events or parties or meetings, they are set up for academic spaces. So if they're reserved, they have to maintain that setup and that integrity for social distancing. So if you wanted to reserve Lamson Lodge, for example, it's not going to be an open space. It's going to have chairs and tables. So you could reserve it on weekends or after 5. We would just have to make sure that it's remaining that setup in there.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. So I wanted to bring your attention to helping you understand and think through, why do students get involved? So what are the reasons that our first year students, or maybe our sophomores or juniors who are looking for involvement opportunities, join organizations in the first place? And so I bring this up because I think a lot of times organizations focused on the what instead of the why. So they spend a lot of time talking about, like, what are we? So for example, I'll give, UPC as an example. What are we? We're a programming board that plans events. Okay, great. That's what UPC does, but why do they do it? They do it because they want to help. They want people to have fun. They want people to build community. They want people to work collaboratively with each other. They want to be able to make new friends, right? And so when we tie our purpose to the why as opposed to the what, it's going to be a lot easier for you all to sell the experience and market and communicate that experience to students. So as you're thinking about this in virtual involvement, in this virtual involvement space that we're going to be in, I really encourage you and challenge you to think about, why are the reasons students get involved in your organizations, and how can you help that in your marketing efforts as well? And speaking of involvement and marketing, pit stop at involvement fair. So hopefully you've all seen, as you are here today, that this is going to be occurring in a virtual format starting next week. So I wanted to share some of the things that we'll be doing on our end, but then also wanted to see if there's any other suggestions or thoughts What we will be doing is launching a website to serve as kind of hub of all the organizations and all the clusters that you all are in. I'm working with University Communications to do that now, hence the request for those information and those pictures and those videos. And that will launch next week. And what we'll be doing is highlighting via email and social media to students a different cluster each day. So one day we'll do art, one day we'll do the academics, one day we'll do media, one day we'll do fraternity and sorority life, and et cetera, until we're able to highlight all those different kind of buckets that organizations fall in, so that if a student is looking for service opportunities, but they don't know that there's 17 different DCA organizations, or if they're looking for something in the arts to be creative and expressive, they don't realize there's music, a cappella, theater, gospel choir, comedy, etc. So to help them kind of understand the bigger picture and then drill down into the orgs. And that's why I'm asking for that info. We also will be highlighting your videos and sharing those through social media and through the website. We will be using the What to Do weekly email that comes out from CLIC that goes out to all students. I'll also be using the first year student listserv, particularly to send out information, even though we know that involvement opportunities are open to all students. My hope is that we can target some content to the first years. I did present to all the first years virtually during AUGO, and you would think they had no idea because I keep getting daily emails about involvement opportunities. So I think they're just anxious and they want to find community and they want to find sense of belonging, and they're worried about doing that in a virtual way. I'll say that there might be a possibility for an in-person involvement fair, socially distant, after we get through this initial period of the start of the semester, but it comes with pros and cons. If we were to do an all-day, one-day involvement fair, it would have to be very spread out across campus, and then students might be running from one side to the other to find orgs. So that could be a challenge for them, even if we cluster them by group. The other option we could do is have an involvement fair over several days, but then whoever's on that last day is probably going to feel like students are burnt out and they didn't come to see them on that last day. And so there's pros and cons to both, but I'm not opposed to it. I'm still exploring it, but I'm trying to do what is aligned with both Denison's policies, Ohio's guidelines around mass gatherings, and what national school, like all schools across the nation, are doing as it relates to involvement fairs. We're also asking that folks, just like we're asking you to refrain from reserving space during this beginning of the semester, we're also asking you to not request Slater tables for tabling as a way to kind of get around the fact that we don't have an in-person involvement fair. That brings me to recruitment opportunities for you all. So beyond the involvement fair, there are a lot of different ways that we can think about recruitment. Could you have someone create or design a flyer that just generally talks about your organization? Maybe not an event or program, but still highlights what you all do and have those posted in particular areas. If you have social media accounts, include CLIC, include Denison CLIC, and we'll make sure that we're resharing and reposting that. Also wanted to say that there might be an opportunity for us to host information sessions, either virtually or potentially in person. And I would say that if you're looking to do an in-person session to accommodate space, think about, can you have one officer there and potentially, accommodate 9 to 10 students that might be interested in your organization in spaces that are really large. So Slater Auditorium, Slater third floor, Moon Hall, all of those capacities are 30 or more for post-COVID. So think about a space that might be able to hold more people if you're interested in having an in-person information session. Tabling eventually, using table toppers, and then also use your members. Think about word of mouth and how can you get information out through your members and use that network of people that are involved in your organization. So I'm going to pause here to see if there are any questions around involvement fair or recruitment.
Hi, I have a question.
Yes.
When is that info request due by?
Good question. So I asked for Friday because I know that I'm likely going to be spending some time this weekend trying to get it live for the following week. And I'm also working with other campus partners. So sorry,
So tomorrow, Friday.
Yes, ideally. Because
Okay.
My goal is to have the website live by Monday, Tuesday, maybe. But I'm also recognizing I'm working with other campus partners and I want to give them enough time to get the content ready and get it out to you all. If it comes over the weekend, it's not the end of the world. I will work on other pieces, but as it comes in, I will add it. So if you go on the website when it launches and you're like, where's our stuff? I'm going to add it as it comes in, but just know that I'm trying to get it up and shared with UCOM as soon as possible.
I have another question, Dana.
Yes.
I know I kind of emailed you about this, but in terms of, it was kind of vague. So in terms of collecting emails for like an email list for new members, should they, I know in the form it asks for like the president's email, is it going to say on the website to just like reach out to that person if you're interested, or could we even like have a Google Doc? Like each club can make a Google Doc and you can link it on that website too.
Yeah,
and people
I'm
could
fine
add
with that. I thought about your email, Emily, after you sent it. Like, I don't have the capacity to make 160
No.
Google Docs,
Like
but
clubs could do it if they wanted to do it that way. Like a club could do it and send you the link.
yes, I would be fine with that. If you wanted to say like, click here to sign up or click here to share your email. My goal is when we have that content for each group, it'll have your picture or your video, your title, your purpose, who's the contact, when do you meet, a link if you've shared it. If you haven't, we can update it, and then any additional pieces. So my goal is that each org will kind of have all of that information laid out as students are exploring the website. But yeah, we can put a form if that's what you all want to do. You can send them to me. If you haven't filled out the form yet, you could put it there, whatever you want to do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about meetings. As someone who is new to the Denison community, I can only imagine how our first years feel as trying to join and learn things in a virtual space, but then also meeting people with masks and how odd and weird this time is. And so I wanted to remind you, as you're holding meetings, whether they're virtually at first, like we've asked, or down the road in person, think about how you can clearly explain the purpose of your organization, and how you can provide potential members an idea of what goes on with your organization in a typical year. What are the events or programs, experiences that you typically do, so that they can have a sense of, what do I expect from this organization? And also knowing that you have to be flexible and creative as we're dealing with COVID. Make sure that you connect your organization to those common reasons why students get involved. When you have that first meeting or you have your info session, help them understand why they want to participate and why they should get involved. Plan an icebreaker or some type of social activity. If you want to Google virtual icebreakers, there's tons of them. I linked a few here for you. One of my favorite go-tos is like, grab the thing that's closest to you and tell a story about it. So like, it could be the real thing, like, I'm really thirsty because I've been in meetings all day and I need some water. Or it could be something silly like, this is a sacred cup from my family. Like you can just make up, think of some way that you can still engage people, virtual bingo, favorite song, something. Let them have fun and meet. Consider what an info session might look like in small person after this, beginning of the semester. And if you do have a virtual link that is regular, if you use Zoom or Google, like you can set up a link where it's the same link every single week, so you don't have to create a new one. Share that with us so that we can also connect students to your organization if they express interest. With that, I wanted to talk a little bit about retention. I think retention will definitely be a challenge this year, whether it's because you have folks that are remote learning, or it might just be harder to connect students in this virtual space when you spend all day, potentially all day on a computer in class, and now we're asking folks to be on video for social organizations. I know that retention might be an issue. So I encourage you to think about how you can ask yourself and members, why did I join this organization in the first place? If you can answer that and really go back to your why, that can also help you in your recruitment for students. How can you assign tasks to help create buy-in for members? So there's this organizational theory that talks about how organizations kind of function in thirds. There's this top third, which is you all, your leaders. You've taken this elective role, you go above and beyond, you give 100% all the time. And then there's kind of this middle third, which are the people, who meet expectations, they do what they're supposed to, like they're pretty good members. And then there's this bottom third of people who, they don't come to anything. It's like pulling teeth. They never respond. They don't pay their dues, whatever it is. And what we do often in organizations is we focus on the bottom third instead of focusing on the middle third and making the middle third great when they're, taking them from good to great. And so as you're thinking about your organization and your leadership this year, how can you assign tasks, tap people, get people more involved, so that as you're thinking about transitioning out of this leadership role, whether because you're graduating or you're ending your term, how do you cultivate the next group of leaders to come after you? I think explaining processes and lingo and terms to new members is really important. As a new member of the community, I hear things like locations or words, and I don't know what they mean, and our first years and new members aren't going to know those things either. How can you plan socials and team builders? Think about how you might connect a new member to a returner. They could grab a meal together one-on-one, coffee, go for a walk on campus, and do your best to make sure that they feel included. And if you have questions, ask us for help. I'm always happy to brainstorm or think about ways that you might be able to connect new members to your organization. Wanted to talk a little bit about DCGA funding and purchasing. All of the information can be found on My Denison as well as on in the org handbook. But I have a 2-year-old that's coming to join us. You want to say hi, bud? Do you want to say hi? Can you say hi? Say hi, everyone. I just woke up. So mommy's going to go hide. Okay, I'm going to walk and talk. Multitasking. So DCGA funding, I wanted to make a note in here about, with us going remote and with COVID, there are some additional ways that you can file for reimbursements or purchases or requests in this virtual space. So you can use purchasing and account payable emails to get that information to you. This is a change in the procedures as it has been in the past, where you've had to do some of that stuff in person. So wanted to let you know, as you're working on bigger purchases or needing things from accounts payable, you can do that virtually. If you need to make purchases, you can come to CLIC, like those days that I told you someone's available each day, and you can check out a CLIC credit card to make those purchases. Or if it's something that you needed to purchase online, we can do that together in the office. We are tax exempt, and we do ask you to fill out some forms when you do check out that credit card, and we would sit down and look at your DCGA budget before you did make any purchases to ensure that the funds are there. So I'm still learning about funding as a new person, but I'm happy to stop and see if there's any questions about that. No? Okay, great. Heaven, you had asked about additional funding opportunities, so I wanted to share. There's 2 other sources of funding that at least I'm aware of that I wanted to make you aware of. So when we went virtual in the spring, that pool of funds that didn't get used because we weren't having events and programs for organizations was pooled into what we've called the DCGA and Student Development Collaboration and Inclusion Fund. These are for organization-sponsored events that are intended to provide social opportunities for students, that provide opportunities for you to collaborate with other orgs or with other departments, or if you're trying to have a community-wide event, funding for that. You can submit a proposal, and funding will be up to $1,000 for a program or event or experience. And then CLIC will do an event co-sponsor application as well. Well, we'll work with campus organizations to promote opportunities for collaboration through your organization, and we'll allow you to have half of the event program cost. Or if it's a small cost, I'm willing to cover the whole thing depending on what it is. So not to pick on Heaven, but she's here, and the example I've been giving so far is that she came to me with an idea to do a social media campaign around enforcing positive behaviors around mask wearing for several organizations for a social media campaign with a gift card raffle. And so I've approved that. We're going to work together on that. So if you have ideas for some of these collaborative events, there's funding available for them. What other ways can CLIC help? So again, I know I'm a new director and I don't know what all your relationship was like prior to me getting here, but I want you to know that we're here to fully support all organizations and all organization leaders. And we can do that in a number of different ways. One being helping you out by advertising things on social media, as well as the What to Do weekly email that goes out to all students. Our office sends it on Monday. If you want to send content, advertisements, graphics, all you need to do is send it to click@denison.edu, and we'll include it in the next email. If you're looking for connections for service or community partners, CLIC can help you. I know we've got some service-based orgs on the call, so I'll share that, service is going to look different because of COVID, and it's going to kind of fall into 3 different buckets. One being what are on-campus service opportunities. So for example, food recovery and repurposing food that we can get to community partners is one way we'll be doing service. 2, what can we do that's project-based that keeps us on campus? So we might not be able to go to the Humane Society, for example, but could we do a fundraiser, or could we make dog treats or dog toys and then deliver them to those community agencies? And then 3rd, what are virtual opportunities, whether it's mentoring, coaching, supporting, building community in a virtual space, because we are both wanting to keep our Denison students safe by keeping them on campus, but we also want to keep our community partners safe. And community agencies are changing their policies as it relates to visitors as well. And so, and I'm happy to talk through some of those things as well if you have additional questions. One area I'm really passionate about and I love doing at my job at Elon is consultations and organization development. So this is me telling you that you don't have to recreate the wheel. If your organization is struggling with recruitment, retention, goal setting, all those leadership skills that I've tried to talk about, mission and vision, transition leadership, conflict, focusing on leadership skill development, dealing with advisors or support from your advisors, I'm happy to step in and either facilitate something for you or for your org as a neutral third party, or I'm happy to give you the tools and resources so that you can deliver that content to your exec or to your organization. So if you're facing some type of problem, please let us know. And I also know the Red Frame Lab has offered the same thing. If you come to us with a problem or an issue, Red Frame Lab is happy to sit down and help you brainstorm that as well. And then finally, the event collaboration and marketing that I mentioned before. So those are all my kind of not COVID related updates. And then I'm going to give you some of the Cliff Notes version around COVID. I know a lot of you've gotten lots of emails and lots of communication, so I don't want to reiterate it again. But with the community and care agreement, we're going to ask you as organizations and organization leaders to ensure you're wearing masks and you're doing things in a socially distant way. It's probably going to be times where you have to hold your peers accountable, either in a group setting or just outside around campus. If you're using space on campus, ensuring that you're disinfecting it and cleaning it before and after, and just reimagining how we do events and being able to be, the orgs that I think are going to do well are the orgs that are going to have a growth mindset, that are going to be able to be strategic and creative and innovative and think outside the box. Also wanted to share some of our social life expectations around what this first couple of weeks are going to look like. We really want to mitigate risk while also trying to create this social life. And they kind of sometimes feel like they're at odds with each other. I definitely was on campus this weekend for our late night WOW events and saw lots of violations of the social life expectations. And so whether it's you connecting with your org members to ensure that they're being safe, but then also ensuring that your organization isn't sponsoring anything, whether informally or formally, that would put people at risk. Being mindful of your in-person gatherings in those first couple days and the first couple weeks, and knowing that all of this is going to impact our guests, our visitors, party registration, organization travel, spaces on campus, in-person gatherings, and then the involvement fair. So what does all this mean, whether it's the community care agreement or the social life guidelines? We're really encouraging folks to utilize virtual meetings as much as possible. One, to keep everyone safe, but then also to engage our remote learners. I know that there are I know of at least 2 org presidents that are learning remotely this semester. And so how do you continue to engage people in your organization when they're not physically on campus? Thinking about ways that you can use informal gatherings, whether it's outside or in socially distant spaces that are large enough, and keeping those groups under 10, looking at registered events in the near future, and then thinking about guests as well in the residence halls. I'll talk about party registration and then I'll pause for any of these COVID related questions. So for those of you who might host events or host events with alcohol, a reminder that the available spaces will look different. Like as Emily asked, Bandersnatch and Lamson and some other places are not available because they're being used for classes. So if you want to see the full list plus the COVID capacities, you can find it on My Denison at the party registration process site. One change is we're asking for all organizations that host a social event down the road to provide a guest list after the event. So if in the need that we need to do contact tracing, that we would be able to do that. When you think about social events and alcohol, we have our masks off, we're maybe not standing 6 feet apart. There might be a higher likelihood of transmission potentially, so we want to keep people safe. And that golden rule of thumb for now is 30 people, both inside and outside, for any type of party or social event. That number might change as we go through the semester. It might increase, it might decrease, but right now that's kind of the parameter we've set. So pause here if there's any questions around the community care agreement, social life, or party registration. All right, y'all are making this easy for me. Transportation and travel, Cliff Notes version, no university sponsored in the first couple weeks. We also want to keep you all on campus as individuals. After this kind of beginning period, there will be a review of mission critical requests for vehicles for things that, for example, can't be held on campus or can't be done virtually. And that'll be reviewed by campus safety, CLIC, and your org advisor. So for example, that I've given, Denison Outdoors Club has talked to me about, we center our mission around outdoor events and rock climbing and hiking and camping. Can you do some of those things in a socially distant way that's responsible? Yes. How do we get there? It means we have to travel. And so I think there are some ways that we could consider off-campus travel to be supported by your organization, but we really need to be planful and thoughtful about it. And then also to remind you that just like COVID capacities in rooms, vehicle capacity has been reduced. So if you're looking to reserve a 12-passenger van, it now holds 4 people, the driver and 1 person per row. So as you're thinking about university vehicle use, if you're needing more than 4 people, that's going to mean multiple vehicles. And then a quick reminder around our visitor policy. Visitor refers to anyone who is not a Denison student, staff, or faculty. And so whether those guests are third-party vendors you've used for organization events, other guests that you might have for social events, speakers, lecturers, people like that's something, community partners, that's going to be things that we need to think about as it relates to visitors. So if you have a mission critical event that is going to require a visitor, let's set up some time to talk about that. So just as a kind of final piece, what are all the policy and updates and changes as it relates to COVID? Rethinking large campus events so that we're mitigating risk. Rethinking the party registration process for spaces, capacities, and that guest list. The use of fraternity, sorority life, house, and lodge spaces, as well as if any of your organizations have offices, the capacity has been reduced, and we're also asking people to hold off on using those spaces for the first couple weeks. Third-party vendors. I met with a student today who wants to have an off-campus vendor for their organization because it's mission critical. We're talking through how we might be able to make that happen. The chorus space will still be open, but we're asking folks to clean it before and after if you use it to make any marketing or publicity. And then university vehicles. So I know I've been talking a lot, and that's a lot of information to throw at you in a short period of time. So I want to pause here to answer any questions, any feedback, concerns that you have, things that you feel like I need to know or think about.
One question I have is if we wanted to get like pizza for the club or like some food, like I have a car so I could like drive and get it off campus, would that be an issue after the 14 days?
Yes, for a couple reasons. And I think we can talk. So one is that, we're trying to keep folks on campus. 2, technically with our DCGA budgets, we are, you're not supposed to use budgets for food or prizes or like things like giveaways. And we should go through catering. But then in addition to that, any food service has to be either pre-packaged food or it has to be served in like a buffet style or like by someone who's food certified safe. So could you get pizza? Possibly, but then when we're thinking about all those other layers around budgets, travel, and COVID, maybe not the best idea. So could we do pre-packaged snacks or individual things? Or, could you do something like Chipotle burritos where each person gets their own and it can be delivered to campus? So I think there could still be opportunities for food off campus, but just thinking like creatively and thoughtfully about how we do it to keep both that food vendor safe, but then also your org members too. Does that help, Sarah?
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? Was this helpful? A lot? Give you a lot to think about? Too much information? I try to really jam a lot into the short period of time because I know that there's a lot of things impacting your organizations. I want you to be planful and safe and creative. I think the one thing that keeps me up at night is worrying that either CLIC or our campus organizations will host or sponsor something that leads to either a perceived or real outbreak of COVID. And at the end of the day, I want you all to have fun and connect and build community, but I also want to keep you safe. And as I see universities across the nation with COVID cases increasing and schools closing and going virtual, I think we have the benefit of being a smaller community and being proactive and holding people accountable. And I really see that role for you all as student organization leaders, which I know is easier said than done, but I'm hoping that I can equip you with that confidence and that ability to lead your organizations effectively, but also hold people accountable. Any other questions? So as a final note, I'll just remind you, I am always happy to jump on a call. This is the second time I've seen Emily today. I've seen some of you also. I know I've seen emails from some of you. Anything that I can do to help answer questions, whether it's a quick phone call, a video call, do not be afraid to reach out. I always prioritize trying to respond to students' emails as soon as possible over others, even when my email is piling up. So please know that I'm available and responsive and happy to help as we deal through the semester. And as things change, as I get more information, please be on the lookout for communication from me and from CLIC. But I hope that this will set you up for having a successful semester.